throw it in? Yeah. Throw it in. Good job.
Sometimes, in the gray days when I cannot write, I put on a blossom or a saffron smock, lay snares for thoughts about my room, charms for thoughts that poets plan to write and busy people have forgotten.
You know, there's this little sprightly woman, because she wasn't awfully tall and she was very slender, and she was always either in jeans and like a wool shirt, and her red wool cap, I remember that a lot. Or she had wonderful exotic silks and patterns.
I was pretty small, I think, when I first met her. Of course, she was very artistic, and she wrote quite a bit too, and smart.
And I saw her for the first time when she was a petite lady. And I don't know what I was expecting, but something larger than what it was, you know. But she immediately, you know, it was in her voice. And she told this fascinating story, as I recall it, about her husband. He left for supplies and never returned. And I said that in about 10 seconds. She gave me a 20-minute dissertation, and you could see and feel the snow and hear the wind, and it was frightening.
To me, she's always been a strong woman. And I've always just thought of her as a strong woman, to leave your family, to leave the place where you kind of have it made, and to go out west and live on a mountain and do your own thing and really not look back. I don't think she looked back very much.
In 1929, Neal Forsling divorced and moved to the top of a mountain alone with 2 young daughters. And when she first threw red earth into a bonfire and said the words, "Red earth burn," they had only just started life at their new homestead, Crimson Dawn. It was the summer solstice, and the story goes that she used the celebration to entertain her 2 daughters and their friends on the mountain, but perhaps it served as her initiation. Inspired by European traditions that closely observe the movement of the sun and the moon throughout the year, the observation of the Earth's longest day is still relevant, but Neal's summer solstice would be presided over by 7 witches. 7 witches and a cast of other characters that shared the mountain with Neal and her daughters. Casper journalist Phil McCauley once said that the stories of Crimson Dawn may be some of the only folklore to which Wyoming can lay claim.
The first time Mother ever saw this place, it was after a party and one of these all-night jobs over at Bear Trap. And some rancher said, "I want to show you the most beautiful place on the mountain." And he drove everybody over, and the dawn was just breaking. And at that time, she called it Crimson Dawn. So when she took up her homestead, that's what she officially named it.
It was the second summer that I visited Star Wallow that I saw for the first time that place that I eventually would file on, prove up, and in time receive the patent from the government signed by the President, Franklin D. Roosevelt. On a midsummer day, I decided to take some of the children and go on a lazy hike with no special destination in mind. I felt in a dreamy state of contentment when the road started making turns as if something would happen. Ahead, blue light came through the trees as if they were ending. I had a feeling I might be approaching the sea. Then we came directly out into an opening. The children stopped talking. I stood with my mouth open, for it seemed that we were standing in the center of the universe.
When I was a little girl, I was one of the mountain brats, the youngest mountain brat.
You were the youngest.
I was the youngest, yes.
Right.
Now I'm 82. The very first one, she took us up on the butte and just called it Midsummer's Eve, and that was the first one. We'd go out and build the shrines in the daytime, and then she would tell us another story about another witch at night. She was the kind that when you looked under a leaf, you could see the fairies.
Hello, I'm Nelson Olmsted, ready to introduce you today to a charming lady who lives all alone on a mountaintop. It's June 21st, the longest day of the year. The sun has now set over Casper, Wyoming, leaving a slight blush on the clouds in that proud Wyoming sky. Up on Casper Mountain, 7 miles south of the city, a unique ceremony is taking place. It is Midsummer Eve, and the enchantress of Casper Mountain, Mrs. Neal Forsling, is ready to lead her faithful believers on a tour of the forest shrines as she has done for nearly 40 years.
You know, she would do interesting things, like she would have the children pick up little rocks, and then you'd go in and sit in her cabin or by where they were having the coffee and cocoa, and she'd tell your fortune. Yeah. And she'd, I don't know, she'd just look at them and look at the children and tell them something. It's amazing how often when she did that, something resonated. Didn't get it wrong very often. I remember my father had this whole series of weird and scary characters he showed up as. One year, the scariest one, he was what was called a Wendigo, which was Northwood's spirit that comes and steals people away. And of course, he was flitting around in the woods and making scary noises, and people thought that was marvelous. So you always had something unexpected happen.
When Neal was no longer able to make the yearly pilgrimage to the shrines in the forest, her daughters took on the storytelling role. Over time, the Crimson Dawn Association introduced the living characters now found along the trail.
That way.